This is a presentation on repairing the Kwikee steps on a 2000 Safari motorhome. The steps are the same as used on many other coaches. This picture shows the steps before they were straightened. It's not apparent here, but they were actually bent from when the coach was stuck on the side of a hill. This shows the steps removed. And you can see, if you look very carefully, a bend in the step arm. This is very heavy metal, so it was impossible to straighten it on the coach or even as a unit. The entire system had to be taken apart. Now, normally, most people won't have the steps bent like this, but there are reasons to repair the steps. Sometimes the rivets start to get worn and the steps don't close properly and so forth. So this picture shows the step after it's been removed, and you can see the bend quite clearly here. Now what has to be done in order to repair this is to cut the rivets off with a grinder. There's no other way to do this, and they're very heavy rivets, so once they are taken off, the only way that I could find to get them out was to use a hydraulic press. Here you can see the steps totally disassembled and the motor removed. You can see the gear drive there. I found that this thing was completely dry. I don't think it had ever been properly lubricated since it was bought. This is another view of the steps taken apart with the bend in the arm. And again, this arm had to be straightened using a hydraulic press. It wasn't difficult to do, but it's very heavy metal. And lastly, on this picture, you can see the rivets there after they've been ground off. And again, as I say, you have to press them out with a hydraulic press. Not difficult, but that's the only way I could get them out. Now what follows here is the list of parts that were used to replace the rivets with bushings. I got this information from the IRV2 site, and someone that had a bounder had replaced his steps, and he did a very good job. So I really followed his basic instructions, and I give him credit, but I can't find the link again, although I've looked several times. So this list here is from McMaster's, and you can see the list of parts here. The bushings and pins for this fit perfectly, so there was no drilling that was required. One thing I should have done differently, I put the nuts on the outside. I'll have to go around and switch those around and put them on the inside. It just, I think, would make a better finish to it. I did sand it somewhat and then paint it, but you can't really see that here yet. This is just more pictures of the system with the rivets installed. This shows the trailing link that pulls the steps in and out. And on there, you can just barely see it, but there's the bracket that holds the trailing arm there is bent. So I had a difficult time getting the pin out. But if the bracket is straight, the pin just comes out. It's just got a cotter pin in it. Now the pictures that follow are the as-built wiring, or at least as I got it. The wiring that I had was very poor condition. People had patched into it. They'd bypassed the interlocks for the ignition and the door opening and so forth. The only thing that worked was when the switch was put to the on position, the step would come out. When it was turned off, it would go back in again. That's a serious problem, because with the interlocking bypass for the steps, of course, somebody could go out. It could not be extended at night, for example, and then you're in trouble. Anyway, that was all repaired, and you can see the holes and so forth and T-connections where people had patched into this thing. One of the things that was done that was extremely dangerous was they took the power lead for the motor and hooked it up to the light switch that was turning on the porch light. Now that was a 1.5, maybe at the most 2 amp wire. This is a 30 amp circuit breaker on it, resettable breaker under the main panel where the breakers are. So I rewired that. I think they had a short, and then they bypassed it, some RV lot specialist, and left it like that. But because that wire runs up inside the coach and into areas where there's wood, there could have been a fire there with that. The way the system works is when the step is all the way extended, the current draw starts to rise, then there's a sensor that turns that power off to the motor. If that ever failed and the thing just kept on pulling amperage in there, of course, then that wire turns into a heating element and could cause a fire. Now what you can see here with this plug is this is a good way to test the steps when they're out. All you need is some clip leads. The book says you need a special connector. That's not really true. You just need a battery to hook on and a heavy wire to hook on the power to the motor. That needs to be reasonably substantial. And then clip leads for these connectors here. There's no power draw on these. These are logic connectors. They're simply ignition on, door lock, and step switch. What I did was I did not test this after I'd repaired it, thinking, well, I'll just plug it back in. Of course, it didn't work. So I had to take the whole thing out again. It's very heavy. So I'd recommend when you do this, go through and do the checks that are in the manual that I've included in this, on a link on at the end of this video, or on this site here. And it's very simple to go through the checks and have the thing extend and retract and so forth. Then you know you have a working system before you go through all the work of putting it back in again. The other thing that I did was to replace the bulb light with an LED light. I sealed it with silicone spray to protect it. And also there's a purple wire there that was never hooked up on the motorhome. I ran another wire from that to the porch light, and what that does is that causes the controller to turn the light on when the porch light is on. So it was a simple change to do, and it worked quite well. And the last picture just is the steps installed.